What is the current status of drones in Ukraine? How is Ukraine using drones, and what kind of drones are they using? So first off, a shout out to the Angry Bird Squadron and Birds of Prey. If it wasn't for you, none of this would have been possible. Shout out to Operator Starsky, who put me in touch with Ukrainian drone engineers, and to Colonel Vogel at the Joint Air Power Competency Center, where I was invited to speak last October. But before we get started, a little bit of background here. I gave a lecture to some Army 35 Foxtrots about 2 months ago. These are all-source intelligence analysts, about what Ukraine is doing with their drone tech and where they might be going with it and how that can reflect on the United States military. So this video is a modified lecture that I recorded that I gave to some contractors with unclassified intelligence. And this video will be done in a very Perun lecture format where I show slides. The slides are available at ryanmcbeth.substack.com for paid Substack members. If you're not a paid Substack member and have a .mil, just send me an email. Let me know. I will get those slides to you. But dude, my Substack's like $5 a month. You can spare $5. And you get to access a lot of features that you can use in your career. One more thing. You know, it's kind of funny. I actually had people reach out to me on Instagram, and they sent me an email, and they said they never heard back. So I tried to get to the bottom of this. I Googled myself, and guess what? Data brokers have associated the wrong email with my name. I don't know who this dude is, but it's not my email. Now, the funny thing here is that this is like, I feel sorry for this dude. I'm actually going to contact him and tell him about Aura, which is my sponsor for this video. If you've ever wondered how scammers get your phone number or why your inbox is flooded with spam, this is why. Data brokers like this sell your data, and they do so without your consent, and they do it to anybody who has a credit card. Heck, they probably add the purchaser's data to their database as well. Now, they are legally required to remove your data if you ask, and they make this process hard on purpose. I've actually recommended Aura to people before to get their names removed from these sites. They take care of actually contacting these brokers to get your information removed. So think of Aura as an all-in-one digital security tool. You get weekly summaries like this one here that was sent to me the last week of March. You also get real-time fraud alerts, 24/7 monitoring, as well as round-the-clock US-based tech support. Plus antivirus and a VPN and a password manager. If anything does happen, Aura includes $5 million of identity theft insurance protection, as well as fraud experts that can help. So if this dude had just used Aura, maybe he wouldn't be confused for me getting all these weird emails. So go to aura.com/Ryan. Try Aura for 14 days. In those 2 weeks, you'll discover where your data is being exposed and sold. All right, let's start the lecture. All right, welcome everybody. Thank you for attending this lecture. I'm going to ask that the proctor, the instructor, hold all questions till the end, and then we'll go through a Q&A session afterwards. A couple of things about me to start. My name is Ryan McBeth. I'm a retired anti-tank heavy weapons infantryman. I'm a software engineer, cyber guy. I used to work on C4ISR systems for Accenture Federal Services. Currently work as an intelligence consultant at Velocity. I'm also known as the Iranian missile guy on Newsmax. I'm also a YouTube content creator. I guess I'm an intelligence influencer. And believe it or not, I am not a former CIA, DIA, or Mossad. Although if you do happen to work for one of those organizations, I will be more than happy to sign the back of the check. I'm going to start out by talking about this little drone right here. Once upon a time, there's a little drone that could. Performed really well during the initial invasion. The Ukrainians even made a song about it. By July of 2022, Russia had figured out how to do electronic warfare against this drone. By October 2023, the Bayraktar TB2 was mostly relegated to reconnaissance. At the start of the war, the drone advancements came at the pace of every 6 to 8 months, roughly. Today, drone advancements are coming at the pace of every 6 to 8 weeks. Every 6 to 8 weeks, there's a new type of technology that's being integrated into drones. So, as of today, 70% of casualties caused by drones were on both sides. Just a couple of years ago, just last year really, 70% of all casualties were caused by artillery. That has shifted over to drones. Ukraine is specializing in first-person view drones, bombers, and interceptors. FPV drone, you see that on your left. Backfire K2 bomber, that's an example of one of Ukraine's actual honest-to-God bomber drones with a payload bay and everything. Fowler Interceptor, that's a homegrown Ukrainian drone model. First-person view drones, let's kind of get into them. You basically have three types. You have anti-personnel drones, you have anti-tank drones, and you have landmine delivery drones, at least when it comes to aerial drones. Landmine delivery drones, believe it or not, they are kind of falling out of favor right now. And the main reason is that Ukraine just is not facing Russian armor as much as they used to. They're facing a lot of Russian light trucks. They're facing people on motorcycles. There have been cases of Russians facing, or Ukrainians facing people on donkeys. But they're not facing armored vehicles as much, so you're starting to see fewer anti-tank drones that'll go and drop off an anti-tank landmine. FPV pilots are fairly close to the front lines. They normally live in trenches or in temporary shelters. So these guys are embedded with the infantry, or very close to the infantry. It's not like the global war on terror, where the United States is operating all of our drones out of Nellis Air Force Base in Nevada. These guys are really close to the front line, if not on the front line, usually operating from a bunker. All right, bomber drones. This is really unique because the world has literally never seen this before. The Backfire K1 is the latest example of Ukraine's bomber drones. They carry 2 mortar rounds, or roughly 10 to 12 pounds of payload with a range of 86 to 93 miles. They can also carry 16 30-millimeter anti-personnel bomblet grenades. And these are the VOG 30 grenades. And they do this from an internal bomb bay. So Ukraine has a drone, and they put an internal bomb bay in this drone, and they can drop munitions out of this drone literally like a bomber. Now, an onboard ballistics calculator is used to estimate when to drop. Its software is constantly being improved. The organizations I spoke to about this tech, they wouldn't really get into the ballistics calculator, but suffice to say, there is a piece of software that can use visual clues and other clues to figure out how high up it is, and from that, when to drop the munition to hit the target that the operator selected. When finished, the drone returns home. They prefer to land by parachute. They can also do a belly landing. Parachute takes a lot of stress off the airframe. Now let's talk about interceptor drones. Well, here's two, the Fowler and the Brave 1, which is a German design that Germany has given or sold to Ukraine. These interceptor drones directly crash into enemy drones, and they stop them by smashing right into them. Some interceptors also use shotguns or nets. Ukraine also has aerostats that launch interceptors. So essentially, this aerostat you're seeing there is it holds one interceptor on it and has a bunch of other sensor systems. That's the middle picture. And when that thing fires, they have drones that can fire from the actual aerostat. They also have several more on the ground. And I believe the range of this with thermal cameras is about 5 to 8 kilometers, roughly. So these things can protect sensitive military installations. There's also long-range drones like the Seth and the UJ-25 Beaver. The UJ-25 Beaver has a 1,000-kilometer range. It has attacked Moscow before. So one of the things that you can kind of say about the current war in Ukraine is that the difference between a cruise missile and a drone is kind of becoming murky, right? Ukraine's newest Seth drones are essentially copies of the 136 Shahed, except they're a lot smaller, and they also have autonomous targeting on them. I can't get into this that much, but the operator essentially tells it the type of target and the range of the target. The drone figures out how to actually get the munition there. Now, one thing to note is that 10 feet in length is about normal now. So, it used to be when the war started, you saw a lot of hobbyist drones that were very small, and slowly you started building up to different kinds of larger drones. It seems like 10 feet is kind of hitting the limit of what you want to go up to so that it doesn't show up on large radar, the large radar picture. You can do, on radars, you can tell a radar system, hey, ignore targets that are flying this low, or ignore targets that are flying this slowly, or that are of a certain size. And they do this kind of discrimination so that way they don't flood their radars with every single bird and flying object in the air. But it seems like above 10 feet, that kind of ends up showing up on radar. And that's not something you don't want to get identified by radar before you get to your target. Also, quad, hex, and octocopters are becoming common on the Ukrainian side, but only fly at night. Russia really hasn't invested in them, and there's a reason for that I'm going to kind of get to. Here's two examples: the Heavy Shot, which is a 24-mile range and an 88-pound payload, and the R-18, which has a 12-mile range with an 11-pound payload. A lot of these typically fly at night. So I'm sure you've heard of the Baba Yaga drone. Baba Yaga isn't a type of drone. It's kind of a class of drone. These heavy quad and hex and octocopters that essentially only fly at night and prevent the Russians from sleeping. All right, let's talk about drone control. Right now, the 900 megahertz frequency is essentially gone. That whole band is gone. The 900 megahertz was initially used for running those small DJI drones and essentially using cell towers to communicate. Today, that's just totally going to get jammed by Russia. Drones are now operating in two different bands, 300 megahertz or UHF, and 1 gigahertz, which is L-band, like marine radio. But there are ways around this kind of jamming. And I'm going to get into two ways Ukraine is doing this. First is that GPS can be denied to Ukraine, right? So here's what they do. They set up transmitters. And it's really no different than intersection and resection when we're looking for something on the land navigation range. If you go out into the field and you set up two portable transmitters, and they're, let's say, 1 kilometer away, 2 kilometers away from each other, and you know where those two transmitters are, if you're 275 degrees from the frequency of one transmitter, 210 degrees from the frequency of the other transmitter, you can just kind of trace those lines back and you know exactly where you are. So that's one way Ukraine is kind of getting over the GPS jamming. You can also transmit a code. Let's say you have an antenna that rotates once every 30 seconds. So you have this antenna and it's rotating, and every, let's say, 30 degrees it sends out a code. So at B, at 30 degrees, or 0 degrees to 30 degrees, you send out the letter B. At 30 degrees to 90 degrees, or 45 degrees, send out the letter C. At 90 degrees to 135 degrees, you send out the letter D, and so on. So if you're flying in your little drone, if the drone is flying and it detects the letter D, it knows that it's between 90 and 150 degrees from the receiver. Now, this gets more accurate as you put more receivers out there. Only issue is that the codes have to be changed every single day, right? Because if you're sending these codes like in the clear, or even if they're not in the clear, even if they're encrypted, but there is a pattern to that encryption, that'll let the bad guys know, oh, okay, a drone is headed this way from this direction. So you have to change these codes every single day, but you should be doing that anyway with your SOI, your signal operation instructions. Ukraine also has ground drones. They're mainly used for medevac, cargo, mine clearance, and mine laying. Medevac drone, just what you think. I mean, it's a track. This is actually controlled by an operator. You put the casualty on that thing, you send it back. One of the big problems that we're having right now in Ukraine is that ground ambulances just can't get to casualties. There's just too much artillery, and the Russians will target them. Medevac, the idea of helicopter dust-off medevac, that's gone. That's never going to happen. Not in a contested environment. So Ukraine has to use these ground drones for medical evacuation. Let's go to the next slide here. Cargo drones, a simple box on wheels that moves, battery powered, controlled by an operator. It prevents sending trucks up, because if you send a truck up, that truck has a lot of heat in its engine. It will get detected, it will get targeted, it will get destroyed. There's the Odyssey cargo drone that can hold about 1,600 pounds. Mine clearance. So these have little arms that come out, and I'll grab the mine, I'll grab the landmine, the arm comes out, grab the landmine, move it off to the side. Russia has these things as well. So this is not necessarily unique to Ukraine. In fact, this is a Ukrainian copy of a Russian mine clearing robot. A ground drone with a PK was used in an all-autonomous attack on Russian positions just in this December. I believe it was the 11th National Guard used this thing. Here's an example of the NOM drone. It has or the GNOME drone. It has one PK, machine gun, and 2 RPGs. Now, ground drones are kind of interesting. They're not actually controlled. All drones are controlled line of sight. And one of the issues is if you're on an attack, you have to be within line of sight of that drone. So Ukraine will actually fly. They'll fly drones as retrans stations. So the drone will bounce a signal up to the retrans station. The retrans station will send the signal back down to the operator, and commands will go up to the drone, back down to the ground drone. So that's kind of how Ukraine is getting over the lack of line of sight when it comes to some of these drones. Ukraine is also developing fiber optic drones. Now, when it comes to fiber, there's good and there's bad. Typically, the range of these fiber optic drones is between 10 and 15 kilometers. These days, it can get out to 20. Some models can get up to 40 or 50 kilometers on a spool of fiber optic wire. These fiber optic drones, they can't be jammed. Now, there's also some bad things with fiber optic drones. And in some ways, the bad outweighs the good. It's a different tool. You use this tool for different problems, right? So why they make different tools. You don't use a hammer to screw in a screw. So the bad, these fiber optic drones can't be used in the forest. The wires will snap. It's also a single use. If you send a fiber optic drone out and you try to recover it, you essentially lose half your range, right? So that being said, a lot of, at least in Ukraine, a lot of the people using these drones are special operators. Not special operators in special forces, but all they do is fly fiber optic drones. Some commanders are also pushing fiber to the detriment of other projects. And some of this goes back to, if Russia has it, well, then maybe we need it too. So if you have some guy who's a brigade commander and he's like, man, I really like Russia's fiber optic drones. I think we need fiber optic drones, even if it's not the best tool for the job. I mean, what are you going to do? Say no? You want to say no? I don't want to be the guy that says no, right? The last thing is these things leave shiny wires around. And if you look at some of the footage, you just see wires in the tree. They look like Christmas garland. And you can just trace that all the way back to your position. Russia actually doesn't particularly care about tracing things back to their position. because there's not a lot Ukraine can do about it, right? If Ukraine doesn't have enough artillery, you can trace lines back to your position all you want. It's going to be really tough to hit you. All right, let's talk about drone production in Ukraine. Ukraine literally has thousands of basement drone shops. The good news is that this has distributed production, right? It is very difficult to destroy all 1,000, 2,000 drone manufacturing shops. The bad is that you have multiple designs, and sometimes you're making the same mistakes, and brigades compete for talent. So if, let's say, you are in the 11th National Guard Brigade, and you come up with an idea that solves a problem that your soldiers have, you might not necessarily tell the 13th National Guard Brigade, right? Number one, you're busy. Number two, in some ways, like you're competing with them, right? You're competing with them for the best drone footage that will attract Western audiences to send your brigade money. So they're not necessarily helping each other. Most drones are made in distributed factories by thousands of small companies. Russia has these massive facilities, and typically Russia only makes one or two kinds of drones, as opposed to the various experimental models, the thousands of experimental models that Ukraine uses. But most of these shops only use one design, or they concentrate on one design. Once they get it right, they keep making the same design. But they have constant innovation, constant feedback. Because Ukraine has this relationship directly with the brigade that's sponsoring them, they can the people in that brigade can go back to the manufacturer and say, hey, this thing didn't work, and here's why, and here's what you need to do to improve it. And that's really not something Russia has. A lot of brigade sponsorships are through drone kill videos, where they'll record the drones dropping munitions and blowing people up, and then they'll put a link at the bottom of the screen to say, hey, come donate to my brigade when you get a chance. These brigades are full of highly motivated Ukrainian engineers and programmers. And they are certainly motivated to stay out of the infantry. And one of the ways of staying out of the infantry is to make sure that you have a skill like engineering. All right. Ukraine right now is producing its own batteries. This is big news. We have a hard time doing that. Ukraine is also started to produce its own motors. Chinese motors still dominate. For the most part, Ukraine has started to make its own motors, and this is actually really big news, and I'm going to get to why a little bit later. Ukraine has started to produce its own CPRA antennas. These are controlled reception pattern antennas, and CPRA antennas are anti-GPS spoofing antennas. If you look at some of the GPS systems that we have, like the Dagger, if you notice that the GPS in your phone is just one chip, right? Or usually there's two chips. But the GPS on something like a marine radar or marine GPS or a vehicle GPS, or even like a Dagger, like the GPS system used by the Army, there's an external antenna that it's in a circle. That's because these chips are essentially on different slices of a pie, and it can filter out bad signals. And the way I kind of equate it is that if you've ever been out at a bar and you're trying to talk to your friend, but there's like 5 white girls who are celebrating someone's birthday, and they're being loud, right? I love you, oh my God, you guys, you're the best. And you're trying to talk to your friend, right? So what do? You turn your sensors toward your friend, right? You focus your sensors on your friend. So these CPRA antennas, what they can do is they can kind of filter out the noise of GPS jamming and kind of focus those antennas on an area that is known to be good. All right, next slide. Ukraine is creating their own computer vision and autonomous targeting chips. Ukraine is creating their own flight controllers. A company called Viri just made 1,000 made in Ukraine first-person view drones. Let's talk about drone detection sensors. What you see there in the picture is an Israeli IE MHR. These systems were actually bought, I believe, three systems. The Poles, a bunch of Poles crowdfunded one, or crowdfunded three of them from Israel. Israel doesn't give anything away for free. Drone detection sensors. You got thermal sensors, acoustic sensors. The Israeli IE MHR is one, and you have radar sensors. All are very, very short range. These thermal sensors, like the one you see on the left, that is a Ukrainian-made thermal sensor. And this particular aerostat uses thermal sensors that are good to about 8 to 10 kilometers. There's also acoustic sensors. The Shahed 136 is a very specific sound. It sounds like a lawnmower. Initially, Ukraine established what they call the Skyforce network, which was this network of 10,000 microphones. Essentially, it started as a bunch of people with cell phones they put up on sticks. And when someone, they would call someone, and when that call got through to an operator, they would go, oh, okay, there's a Shahed drone coming down this path in this location, because they knew where all the cell phones were. Today, Ukraine has the Zvuk system, which has about a 5 to 7 kilometer range, costs about $500 per sensor. Radar sensors. Radar sensors, long range, but they emit a signal. So anything that emits a signal is bad, right? Anything that emits a signal can be traced back to a location, and you can fire a missile down that signal. One good example, Robin Elvira. Initially, that was used to track birds. And I'm sorry, it was really MHR. It's not acoustic. It was a radar sensor. My bad. But Robin Elvira was used to, initially, this sensor was used to track birds on like airfields. And Robin Elvira realized that a potential for drones, and so they started selling it to track drones. That Robin Elvira is in an undisclosed location. Counter drone. Currently, Ukraine is at the forefront of counter drone. There is literally nobody doing a better job than Ukraine at shooting down drones right now, or stopping drones. First item to talk about is, all right, I got to go back here manually. All right, for counter drone, interceptors, Fowler interceptor, Brave 1. These are extremely effective at shooting down drones. Extremely effective. They're also extremely expensive. So every time you see one of these interceptors go up, I want you to imagine like shooting a Ferrari up into the air, right? Yeah, a Ferrari. About depending on the type, probably about $60,000. So, you know, an XLT model F-150, right? Imagine shooting one of those up in the air. But it's effective. I mean, if you are able to stop an incoming drone by hitting it kinetically and you just save the target, I mean, how much money did you save, right? Next is shotguns. Now, what's kind of weird is that people get really emotional when it comes to shotguns, probably because a lot of people have shot skeet. All right, like everybody has shot skeet before. People have shot shotguns before they've gone hunting, so they kind of know what a shotgun does, and it's very easy for them to comprehend, understand how a shotgun works. But shotguns are only somewhat effective, and then even only when the drone is extremely close and only during the daytime. And even then, ammo shortages are a problem. And you're carrying an extra weapon that you're not going to use for anything else. So that's an issue. There are adapters like this AK-type shotgun adapter. I mean, that's great, but you have to screw it on every time you shoot. You literally put the shell in and then screw the thing on and you shoot. So there are more efficient ways of shooting, and you only get one shot out of that. Believe it or not, spotlights and machine guns are used to protect critical infrastructure. So it's like going back to World War II. They kick on the spotlights and the air raid siren and shoot flak at the Allied bombers. Well, these PK machine guns, they have a spotlight on them, and they're used to identify and target incoming drones. Jammers. Jammers were extremely useful at one point. Today, they're not as useful as they were. One of the issues that they've encountered is that these jammers, they don't work against FPV drones that are wire guided. Now, the way a jammer typically works is that if you have a plane, if you have a drone flying, you point the jammer at it and you pull the trigger, and then essentially this gun sends every single possible shutdown code that it has in its memory into that drone. And when the drone receives that shutdown code, it falls out of the sky. Well, that doesn't work against fiber optic drones, of course. Lasers like the Trizub are being tested. They have about a 2 kilometer range. A lot of people have said lasers are the panacea for drones, but there's a lot of smoke on the battlefield. There's fog on the battlefield. Lasers don't do all that well in smoke and fog. Biggest issue in counter drone right now is range versus cost. Counter UAS drones are expensive, but they have greater effectiveness and range. Machine guns are cheap but marginally effective. Shotguns are cheap, only marginally effective at short range. They're subject to ammunition interruptions, and you also have to carry an extra weapon. Lasers show promise, but they're expensive and they have limited range. And finally, detection is kind of the biggest problem, because if you can't detect that counter, or you can't detect that incoming drone, you can't actually send an interceptor to hit it. So that's a pretty darn big problem. So, conclusions. Ukraine has showed remarkable resilience in its innovation. This was also due to necessity, that is, lack of artillery shells. So, in some ways, we actually made this, right? We created this problem. When the U.S. and Europe didn't give Ukraine enough artillery, they had to figure out a way to stop these Russian advances. And so they turned to drones, which is something they could manufacture fairly easily. And there are some people who think that, we don't need artillery anymore because we have drones. That's great, but artillery works in bad weather. Artillery works in high winds. We're never going to get rid of artillery. You need to think of drones as a way to complement what you have. And I'm going to get into some of the issues with us believing that the next war is going to look like Ukraine in a minute. Ukraine will become an alternative to China in the manufacturing of drone components. So right now, Ukraine is getting a lot of their motors from China. They're slowly moving production away from China into their own motors. It's hard for the U.S. to even do a motor. And it's kind of crazy to think about it, because it's just a bunch of copper wire with a magnet, right? That's all it is. But for whatever reason, we can't really develop these small, cheap magnets, these small, cheap motors for drones. And China has a huge advantage on us. One thing we can't forget is that Ukraine has been doing this for 3 years. We can leverage Ukraine as an ally and a partner when it comes to creating purchasing drones that are high quality, off the shelf, from a supplier that isn't China. So that's something we need to kind of keep into our back pocket here. It's that Ukraine can be a good ally when it comes to buying drones, purchasing drones. Next is distributed manufacturing is both a blessing and a curse. So when it comes to distributed manufacturing, yes, you're really close to the front lines. Yes, you are grabbing information from the frontline people and making changes, and you're iterating fast and you're failing fast and you're responding to those changes. However, you're not necessarily sharing those changes with other people. And that has been an issue in the Ukrainian military, where you might have one brigade with people who just developed drones for that brigade, and they're not necessarily going to share their secrets with another brigade. So you might have people who are all trying to solve the same problems that have already been solved by someone else. But there's really no way of distributing this information out to people, and a lot of the brigades don't necessarily want that in the first place. Insurgents will use this tech. That's really something we have to think about, because in the next war that has an insurgency, we're going to have to deal with the bad guys having these small, cheap drones who are able to put explosives on these small, cheap drones, drop munitions from these small, cheap drones, control other drones from these small, cheap drones, and even do ISR from these small, cheap drones. So the train is just leaving the station when it comes to the use of these drones by terrorist organizations in the future. Next is we must dominate the spectrum. So there's only one spectrum, right? There's only one electromagnetic spectrum. And if we don't dominate the electronic warfare spectrum, the electromagnetic spectrum, we don't have drones, we don't have communications, we don't have GPS, we got nothing. We're back to literally no different than what we had in World War II, right? Maybe even worse than that, because at least during World War II, we still had unencrypted radios. I don't know if the Germans ever jammed them. We could be all the way back to the Civil War, General Grant, right? Just using maps and compasses. So we have to dominate the spectrum. We also have to think in multiple spectrums. One of the issues that I've seen when soldiers go out to the field, some of these soldiers, they have, they're told, all right, you need to camo up, right? You put camo on your face. And you need to, all right, well, you need to conceal the Humvee, right? So you cut down some branches, you put branches on the Humvee, now it looks like a Humvee full of branches, right? But you do that and you step back 20 yards or something, you go like, yeah, it looks good. But did you look at that Humvee on thermals? Because what's still hot? Like the wheel wells are still hot, the axles are still hot, the engine's still hot, the glass might be reflecting, right, from the sun. So if we're not thinking in multiple spectrums, we're going to die. And this also means, like, when we go out and we set up a TOC, the days, the Technical Operations Center, the days of the Taj Mahal TOC are over. The days when we could call back to CENTCOM in Qatar and say, hey, is it okay if I... Over. We're not going to have a Taj Mahal TOC to take care of the thinking for us anymore. Because if we have a TOC that's greater than 1 or 2 vehicles, it will get found, it will get targeted, it will get destroyed. If you can find something, you can kill it today. No doubt. And a Taj Mahal TOC, look, it's going to suck. Maybe you got to run those OE254 antennas 600 meters away. Transmit from 600 meters away. Maybe that's something you're gonna have to think of. It sucks, but I wouldn't want that antenna sticking out of the place where I'm sleeping at night. Finally, do not assume the next war will look like Ukraine. And I leave this one for last because it's probably my biggest rant, and that is, I've heard people say like, "Oh, we need to give every soldier a drone." We need to give every soldier drone drop munitions. We need to give every soldier ISR capabilities. And do we? Do we? And I say that because I think if you give every soldier a drone, like, number one, I'm not carrying it. Like, there's that, right? But also, the whole reason Ukraine is using drones so extensively is that they don't have enough artillery. And if you use something like an FPV drone, that FPV drone is only used once, and then all that money you made manufacturing it, that's gone. It might make more sense to have drones that can drop micro munitions, Like that might be not a bad idea. But for the most part, we want to get away from the feeling that these drones are going to be the way of the future, because I actually believe that we're going to see the rise and the fall of the drone in Ukraine. That by the time the war in Ukraine is over, I think that counter drone is going to be so good that it's really going to make it harder to do drone warfare. That doesn't necessarily mean that we won't see drones, but drones are going to have to shift to things like AI, right? Stuff that can't be jammed. Because right now, like the tempo is with the drone. It's like someone, I'm sure the first time someone with a, the first weapon of war is most likely a spear, right? It's a pointy stick. I'm going to poke you with this stick until you do what I say, right? And so one day someone invented a shield. So the guy with the spear went up against the guy with the shield. Is like, whoa, I can't poke this guy with the stick anymore. What am I going to do? So right now, the drones, the people with the drones are the guys with the stick, right? And the people developing the counter drones, like MSHORAD, they're the guys with the shield. And we're still trying to figure out how this shield thing works, right? But I actually believe that we're going to see the rise and fall of the drone in Ukraine. And disregard everything I said in 8 weeks. It'll be out of date. That's how fast things are moving. That being said, are there any questions? Okay, Okay, I see it. All right. All right. First question: is Ukraine's decentralized drone production model scalable for NATO use? Is Ukraine's decentralized drone production model scalable for NATO use? Yes and no. Like, look, I think of like the British Sten gun, right? Which, if you Google it, Sten gun, it looks like someone welded a bunch of pipe together. I think that's actually what it was. It was a bunch of pipe with some springs that they could manufacture really quickly. There'll always be a role for distributed factories, especially if you're ever doing something like Total War. These basement drone shops, one of the issues is that they don't necessarily talk to each other. So if we could have some kind of way of having these basement industries, and that doesn't necessarily mean people are making bombs in their own house. It really means that basement means like these tiny companies might start their own production facilities. I mean, is it scalable? I think we could do it, but the way the U.S. likes to do things is we put out a bid for a contract, and we have one company make these things. So the idea of making multiple, the idea of getting multiple bids and then giving that contract to multiple people. I mean, I think we did that in World War II with like pistols. That's why you have the Singer sewing machine pistol, and I think Remington Rand, the typewriter company, made pistols. Auto Ordnance made pistols, 1911s. But I don't know if we would see that again. If we would see distributed companies manufacturing this stuff, unless it's one of those total war things where we've lost a lot of our factory capacity and we have to start from the ground up. What is the range and latency of Ukraine's trig-based GPS denial workaround? So as far as a radio can go, right? So imagine an FM radio, right? So imagine an FM radio. What's the distance to that FM radio that you get in your car? And I want to say 90 miles or so. I don't have the exact ranges, but I know that like any radio system, it'll peter out as curvature of the Earth kind of screws with it. How does Ukraine's fiber-optic control system compare to Russian alternatives in performance and vulnerability? That's actually a really good question, and I can't give you an answer to that question because I actually did not ask about that. My assumption would be that it's relatively equal, right? It's not like Ukraine makes stronger fiber than Russia. So it's not like Ukraine can send their FPV drones, their fiber optic FPV drones into trees that Russia can't. So you can assume they both have roughly the same capability. So I would say it's probably roughly equal. I mean, fiber optic tech has been around, I want to say, since the 70s. But I'm sure if I put this video on YouTube, someone will go, well, actually, in the 1960s. Can Ukraine become a serious export competitor to China in drone parts? I think so. I think they can. And, you know, one of the big issues that we've had in the U.S. is that some companies like firefighters or police, EMS, whenever the U.S. government tries to put a ban on using foreign drones as ISR for like EMS, emergency medical services, you always have these fire chiefs come out to Washington and they talk about how an American drone costs $20,000, but a Chinese drone only costs $2,500. So I could buy, you know, a bunch of them. I could buy 10 of them. And what saves a lost child faster? One drone or 10 drones, right? So that's kind of the argument they always give. But the U.S. is never going to be able to make a $2,000 drone. But if Ukraine can make a $3,000 drone, a $3,500 drone, then it's a lot easier to pass those laws and prevent EMS companies, emergency services companies, from using foreign drones. And if you're wondering why that's a bad idea, it's because in the event of a war, China can just go click and then just turn off all the drones, right? Or at least if they don't have the technology to do that, at least they won't be able to get updates, right? So I think Ukraine can become a supplier of drone parts for the U.S. It'll have to be at the end of this war, but they're going to have so much real-world experience that they're probably going to be the world's premier supplier of drones. And not as, unreliable as the Chinese. I don't know why I'm yawning. I'm not bored. And not as unreliable as the Chinese. How are brigades competing with drone talent without cannibalizing each other? I never said they weren't. Usually when someone gets in with a brigade, so one of the things that has happened, a lot of people don't talk about it too much, but the Ukrainians, Ukraine does not have a recruitment problem with their military. They have a recruiting to the infantry problem. A lot of guys do not want to go infantry for understandable reasons. It's a great way of getting blown up. But guys will join a brigade as an engineer and, you know, use their engineering skills, their software skills, their mechanical engineering skills to build drones, and that kind of keeps them away from the front lines. So you're kind of, just by saying, like, how are they doing this without cannibalizing each other? I mean, look, if you have a job that keeps you off the front lines, why the heck would you go to a different brigade where someone doesn't know you and then says, like, you know what? I don't like your designs. You're going to the front lines, right? So that's kind of how, right? Are interceptor drones more cost effective than jammers or shotguns? I mean, so there's effective and there's cost effective, right? So are interceptor drones cost effective? If a $60,000 interceptor drone destroys a $20,000 drone, but it saves a $1 million piece of equipment, yeah, that was cost effective. But if a dude with a $400 shotgun doesn't shoot down that $60,000 drone, while the shotgun costs less than the interceptor drone, it's not as effective, right? So those drone-launched counter-drone munitions are cost-effective in the sense that they'll actually stop the threat. Whereas by the time you're using shotguns, they are way too close. Is there any success with drone-on-drone dogfighting AI? I can't talk about that right now. Ukraine has I'm gonna take that question offline. This is probably going up on YouTube. I'm gonna take that question after we stop recording. All right, thank you guys. Thank you guys for inviting me.
In a world where fashion meets firepower, where style becomes strategy, it's time to gear up for the ultimate mission with Backfire branding. Introducing the Rock Out With Your Chalk Out t-shirt, a tribute to the fearless air cavalry. Feel the adrenaline rush as you don the pride of the skies. For those of you who dare from the air, precision and power unite when you think outside the bomb. And don't miss our Live, Laugh, Launch t-shirts for Patriot and HIMARS, because sometimes defending freedom means bringing the thunder. Finally, for the true defender of the seas, we present Department of the Boat People. Sail with honor and show your allegiance to the world's mightiest maritime force. With these shirts, hoodies, and stickers, along with the tow missile, landmines, and drone warfare. These aren't just shirts, they're statements. They're your way of saying I stand for strength, unity, and style. Get yours at Backfire Branding today.